Welcome to the Inquisitive Room podcast. I'm Sha, your host. This is a podcast that brings interviews and insights from all walks of life from a bird's eye view on the reality of being. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. And if you're new here, we do hope that you stick around. I hope everyone's doing well today and that you're enjoying whatever you're doing and wherever you are in the world. Today, I'm really pleased to talk about a topic with my guest, Claire Hunt, who's an expert in workplace bullying, especially narcissistic abuse. Claire is a writer, she's an educator, she has over 30 years of professional experience, and she was bullied through most of it. It's incredible. So she's an expert on this topic. And I thought it was really important to talk about workplace bullying for several reasons, but mainly because it has an effect on our society as a whole. Company and industry-wide, it's affecting our businesses, mainly because hours and hours are lost due to the time it takes the bully to gossip, to gather together their mob. So all bullies have a mob, and the mob is called flying monkeys. And that term comes from The Wizard of Oz. If you've ever watched The Wizard of Oz, it's a cult classic. And do you remember the Wicked Witch? The Wicked Witch had these monkeys who flew about doing her dirty work. And so the flying monkeys will become bullies too. They bully the person being bullied because they're usually afraid of the bully themselves. They're weak. I would argue as well to say, yes, okay, they could make their own decisions, but in retrospect, I believe they've made a decision. They've made a decision not to challenge the bully. They've made a decision to jump on board with the bully despite what they see for their own eyes. So they may not have a lot of contact with the person being bullied, but because the actual narcissistic abusing bully will tell them lies, because bullies lie, they're pathological liars, which Claire will talk about, then the flying monkeys, the mob, will just believe them. And even if they don't believe them, they will still choose to bully. It is an incredible phenomenon. Psychologically, the bully is damaged. They have usually come from a lot of trauma in life. But whereas most people will go into therapy or seek help to heal the trauma, the bully is usually a narcissist, and the narcissist will rarely seek help. Why? Because they think they know more than a psychologist or a therapist or a psychiatrist. So in my professional work and experience, the narcissist who bullies isn't interested in getting help. They may do it for surface value to make them look like they're trying, but they have no intention of changing. Now, there is a difference though, and usually what I've seen is that sometimes they can temper or lessen the occurrences of the bullying. Maybe they don't, let's say, maybe they don't bully 5 days a week. Maybe they only bully 1 day a week. But they're still the bully. They're still a bully, and it will still come out. So it is a phenomenon. It's affecting business. If it's systemic, which means if a company has gone a very long time without doing anything about it, it's worse, and it will probably never resolve itself until the bully goes. And that's not even a definite. The bully could go, but if it's systemic, it will rise again. Something else, somebody else will come in and do the same. What's important here, and Claire and I talk about this a lot, is that you cannot expect your managers, your bosses, even your colleagues to solve the problem for you. Why? Because they usually can't see it. The reason they may not be able to see it, maybe they can see it and they choose not to, is because managers usually don't know anything about bullying. They don't know the psychological aspects of why a bully bullies. They are not well versed or trained in narcissistic abuse. So, one thing the bully is an expert at is making you, the person being bullied, the victim, because you are a victim. If you are, people get really confused about that term victim. They've made it a negative thing, which is another aspect of bullying. People say, oh, victims, victims. Well, if you've been abused, you are a victim. So what the bully can do and seeks to do is to make you look like you're the problem. So managers who just don't know anything about it, and most of them don't, even some therapists don't know the intricacies of bullying or narcissistic abuse. Counseling courses, therapy courses don't fully function. They don't fully go through that when you're doing your training. Even if you're doing a psychology degree, it's not addressed. So usually that person will bully you in private. So you may think, oh no, my boss does it in front of everybody. Yes, there will be characters who do that. But if they're narcissistic and if they're a workplace bully, especially with narcissistic abuse, what they will do is give you the real intricate big stuff in private so that there's no evidence for other people that they've done it, and so that they can lie and say they never did it. When Claire touched upon this, it was incredible because I've seen it happen. So they're also pathological liars, which Claire will talk about. It is important to address this. Bullying in the workplace is on the rise. It was rampant during the pandemic. I think people are frightened. And that's the thing about workplace bullies. They're usually very, very traumatized through their own lives. But the difference is, so one thing we talk about is why is it that some people who are traumatized, they seek help, they change, and the workplace bullies don't? That's apples versus oranges. We will never know. It's both fruit. It's fruit. Some people choose apples, some people choose oranges. We'll never know why. It's personal likes. Some people will have empathy and want to get better. They will seek not to hurt others. But if you're narcissistic and a workplace bully, and if you have autism, you're on a spectrum in some way, it could be that you're lacking empathy, and it may be very difficult for you to feel what the bullied person feels, the person being bullied feels. And so if you've got that, if you're dealing with that type of bully, then expect the lies, expect the narcissistic abuse to happen in private, so that when you go and say, right, they said this, they said that, it looks as though you're the issue. It looks as though you're sensitive, you're soft, you can't deal with things, when actually all you're looking for is mutual respect. If you come in and say hello, good morning to someone and they don't answer you, so two things, either they didn't hear you or they're just choosing to ignore you. It's rude, so you might say, well, that's not bullying. Well, in a way it is. It's saying you're not important, you're nothing, and I am the most important thing. And the other thing that workplace bullies suffer from is competition. They feel as though you might be a threat to them. And Claire said something very interesting. She's talked about people who are bullied as usually being very good at what they do, so often good looking, things like that. So that's interesting. Now, we know about the looks thing. That happens in childhood a lot, in school. People can get very jealous of the way other people look, and they may even seek to copy their style. You might, if you're being bullied, you might notice someone, you think, oh, they hate me. Well, all of a sudden, they're dressing like you. They're imitating you and emulating you. They may even be copying what you say or how you work. And you think, well, hang on. I thought they hate me. They're bullying me. No, what the bully does, they are bullying you, but the bully doesn't believe you should exist. So they want to steal everything they can from you to make it look like it's them. They don't have any regard for you whatsoever. And so you're not safe in the presence of a workplace bully. But we're going to talk about ways in which you can make yourself safe, because there is legislation. Let's be clear. In the UK, there is legislation about this that protects you. And we're going to talk about how workplace bullying affects society as a whole. We also touch upon the spiritual aspect of workplace bullying and how workplace bullies lack a soul, or the presence of a soul. If you're an intuitive person, that could appear to be weak. People may see you as weak. If you're a nice, you might say nice person, people will see that as a weakness, which is it's a delusion. It's a delusion. Being nice is weak. It's actually the strongest consistency that somebody can have. It means that, you know what, I'm not in competition with anyone. I'm just being myself. I'm present in the world, and that's it. Whereas the bully is, oh no, everybody's after me. Everybody hates me. They're totally paranoid. Paranoia is another aspect of bullies. They're usually paranoid that somebody's going to do something to them, or that somebody's going to take their job. But mostly it's narcissistic bullies. Bullies who are narcissistic, who will believe that they are above other people. So people will fall into that category. So if you're a person of color, you could be a woman as well. You could be of the LGBTQ plus community. You could have an accent. You could be short. We're looking at things that society as a whole has categorized or surmised to be the minority. You could be a black male, but the male part's not the important thing. It's the being a black woman. And that doesn't exclude those categories. So in other words, a black woman could bully another black woman. A gay male could bully another gay male. So it really is about your psychological makeup, but we're going to touch upon how workplace bullying affects society as a whole and the impact that it has on company and industry as a whole, mainly because of loss of productivity. The bully is so busy meeting people behind closed doors and gossiping, trying to create this hate campaign against a person because they're either good at their job or they may be liked in their job. They will see themselves, because bullies hate themselves. Let's be clear. They literally hate themselves. You can see it in their face. And something somebody said to me once is that look in a bully's face, you will see the ugliness. And they also said that they're usually physically not very good looking, which I found very interesting. But we talk about that. So Claire and I talk about that. Companies, industries lose. Now, top companies where bullying is rife, you'd be surprised, or maybe some of you wouldn't be. Healthcare profession, the educational system, charities, all of those aspects, and most importantly, the entertainment industry. Huge and rife with narcissistic abuse and workplace bullying. You only need to look back at the past few years to see how people have been exposed because of the Me Too movement and other movements about having been abused, narcissistically abused, targeted, and bullied within their workplace. A recording studio is a workplace. A movie set is a workplace. A radio station is a workplace. A newsroom is a workplace. All of those spaces, the consulting rooms of a psychiatrist is a workplace. The operating room, the surgical room in a hospital is a workplace. You know, the ward in a hospital is a workplace. All of these places. So these are rife with abuse. It's shocking. Well, how can someone who chose to be in the helping profession be a bully? Well, there's two reasons. The main one is they believe that they can hide it better there. It is less likely for people to believe they're bullies, because how can they be a bully? They're helping people. Well, it may shock you to know that those are the professions that stand out the most. Look at Greenpeace. Remember the whole big thing with Greenpeace a few years ago? That was huge, and we could go on and on. Lots of aspects. The entertainment industry is probably one of the most known now because they're on social media. Everybody involved is on social media so much. It's all coming out. But I want to tell a quick story. It's just reminded me of when I was working as an extra. I was in fashion college in LA, and my agent, who actually I've just reconnected with about a year ago, she's just lovely. It's so funny. I saw her on X. I think it was Twitter, still Twitter at the time. So, but I reached out and she said, "Oh my God." So we're reconnected, but she called me up and said, look, there is a new special, a comedian. This was many years ago in the 80s. A comedian, HBO, it's all quite new format, but he's going to do a bit of like a skit and a show. And his name is Paul Reiser. He's a New York comedian, actor. He was in the Beverly Hills Cop movies. He did a lot of stuff. Paul Reiser, he's going to the show. Now, they're looking for a waitress. They want someone who's 5'8". Now, first off, I'm 5'4". In my mind, I'm 5'6", but, you know, that's my mind. The measuring tape says differently. I am 5'4". I'm just inching to 5'5", but I'm 5'4". And so, first of all, I'm 4 inches too short. But she said, "No, look, I'm going to put you forward. You're going to do this. I think you can do this. There may be a couple of lines for you as well. So we get you into SAG and da da da." And I said, "Okay, fine." I mean, my heart was already stuck with fashion, but I was doing it because it was easy work. And easy money, really, being an extra. And in LA at the time, it was good money. So I did a lot of extra work on movie sets, TV sets, and also music video sets. Now, that was an interesting one. I did one, I'm not going to, huge band. He left the band and did a video, and I was on that set. But I watched him react not very nicely to people. So, but I was on the set. So she said, "No, I'm going to put you forward." So, anyway, result, I was chosen. And so they said, "Look, you need to wear a black skirt and a white top. We've got some costumes, but you can bring your own." I learned early on to bring your own everything, just in case you didn't like what they had. You could always present what you had, and people chose, which was great. So I brought my own stuff, my own clothing, and my own shoes. I had to wear heels. So I was in my heels, and I had to walk from one table to the next and pretend to take an order. The first thing one of the extras sitting at the table said to me was, "You're not 5'8". So this is the mentality. This is not why I'm telling this story, but it's just come to me that happened. But this is the competition bit. And LA is ripe with it. It always has been. It was unnecessary, but I just shot back with, "Well, you don't look like somebody who'd be sitting in a restaurant." You know, but so I'm quick to get back to people. People know that. So, but during that time, I had to walk from one table to the next, and it wasn't even the director. I think it was the AD, the assistant director, or even lower than that, I think, on the totem pole. But he was saying, "Get somebody do something with her heels. We can hear the heels." So we did like 3 shots, and he said, "We can still hear it. Put tape on them. Do something." I was getting like, oh no, what am I doing? So I tried to tiptoe. I tried to walk on my tiptoes so that nobody could hear the heels. Everybody was saying they couldn't hear anything. People, his team shot back and said nobody can hear anything. Anyway, he was focused on the heels. There may have been other issues for him, but that's another story. But anyway, a couple of people were there who were in that on that set. Elliot Gould, who was lovely, absolutely lovely, and Carrie Fisher, who was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, we had a break. Well, it wasn't a break. There's a lot of downtime, as you all know, probably know, in shooting these things. And we were all standing around, and I was going to do another walkthrough. And Carrie Fisher walked over to me and she said, "How are you?" I said, "Fine, thank you. Nice to meet you, da 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 da." And she said to me, "Look, ignore him. He's an idiot." She didn't use the word idiot. She used a few other terms for him, a few other choice words. She said, "Look at him. No wonder he's angry." She was so funny. And we laughed, and people were looking at us, and we were laughing at it. And when she walked away, I said, "Thank you so much for that. Thank you." Now, I'm telling that story because she had empathy. She'd probably seen it all. She had come off of Star Wars a few years before. She was one of the biggest stars in the world at that time. She had her own struggles in life. But one thing this lady, this amazing woman had, and that was empathy. That was empathy, because nobody said anything, but she took her time, walked over to me as an extra, and said to me, "Look at him. No wonder he's shout. Look at him. He's an idiot. Don't worry about him." And I wasn't really worried about him. What I'm always concerned about in any role is just to do the best job I can. That's it. People see it in all sorts of ways. But for me, I know my truth, and all I wanted to do was get it right for them. Poor Paul Reiser, this was his special. He was lovely on the set. That's all I wanted to do. There was somebody else in that. There were lots of people in that. Anyway, we did the take. It was fine. But it was really Carrie who made the shoot so lovely for me. I mean, it was a fun shoot, I have to say. I met some great people. We had a ball on that shoot. There was a scene where we had to watch a film or something. We had to go and we had to dress up. So there was a change in costume we had to wear. We had to dress up. If I can find it, because I do have the film, I will try and insert a couple of clips. I mean, if you blink, you'll miss me. But the lines didn't come. We never did the lines. This is typical for even the number one actors. This is typical. Things get cut and all sorts. But we never did the lines, which was fine, because I wasn't looking to get into acting as such. But I say all that because that was just an example of someone being an absolute idiot, narcissistic, not rage, but just wanting to assert some kind of power. And by the way, that was the least, that was tiny, it didn't bother me. But Carrie just wanted to have a conversation. I believe Carrie wanted to just chat. She was bored, I think, probably as well. So she came over to me, we chatted. And she wanted to have a go at him because he was awful to everybody. Let's be fair. He was awful to everybody. And that's the other thing. When you run into narcissists and abusers, bullies, it's not just you. It's happened before. It would have happened before because it starts in childhood. So usually bullies either have been bullied or start out just bullying. Some of them have been bullied by siblings, some by their parents. So, but usually, I mean, Claire talks about this. People who bully have usually been bullied. And that's why they bully. But they're too self-absorbed to go and get some help with it. And they don't believe they need help. They believe you are the problem just by existing. Just by existing, you are the issue. You're black, you're gay, you're I don't know, from another country, you're I don't know, you're too pretty, you're too handsome, you're too tall, you're too muscly, whatever it may be. However people judge men and women, human beings, they feel they need to bully you. And so we talk about ways in which you can get through that or leave if you need to. Leaving is always a choice. You don't have to remain in an environment whereby you're being abused. And the other choice is you can raise it with your HR company. You can address it yourself. You can do all of those things. Luckily in the UK, there's legislation that protects you as well. But we also talk about why it's important to not seek to harm others on a spiritual level. It's not good. It's not a good idea. You don't want to harm other people. It has a rippling effect on the universe. No wonder our planet is suffering. I think as human beings, we believe we are evolving. We believe we're evolving, but that's because people are focused on technology. Just because we have evolving technology doesn't mean we're evolving as human beings. There's a difference. Intellect versus spirituality and the soul. There is a difference. And also, I don't believe we've changed as human beings. If we look back, there's always been wars. There's been massive amounts of abuse on nations, on races. This is the human condition. This is the human condition. What is different now is that the technology exposes it more. And one thing bullies are missing is that they think they'll never be exposed. And that's why they bully you in private. So there are two types. One will bully you in front of everybody. So they'll come down and say, well, I can't get through to your emails. I can't email you. Well, why can't you? Everybody else is emailing. Everybody else is getting through. Or they'll use their physicality, their stature. They'll stand over you, or they'll just burst into your office door. You know, they'll stand too close. So they're very bad at boundaries, very bad at, and they will hate you if you have boundaries. So they will try and intimidate. So Claire talks about the fact that the word bully is for the word intimidar or intimidation, which is interesting. They think they're intimidating you. But if you've got boundaries, you'll put them up. And you must always put up your boundaries. So that's one type. And the other will be, especially if they're narcissistic or on a spectrum as well, they will say things to you in private so that it makes it more difficult to prove in public. So you could address them and say, well, you said this. And the other thing is they're pathological liars, which Claire talks about. So they'll say, I never said that. They'll lie about it. So the important thing is to keep your notes because there's legislation that will protect you. And companies should be very aware of that. They must be seen to be helping. If not, they could be brought up on it in a big way. And company and industry-wide, it's detrimental. If it's systemic, if it's gone on for many, many years and nothing's been done about it, it's more difficult to rectify it. I don't know if getting rid of the person is the best thing. But you're never going to change the person or people. You know, we talked about the mob, the flying monkeys. They will never change. So if you're being bullied, Claire gives you some expert tips on what to do. We talk about the psychological impact it has on the person who's being bullied. So, you know, sickness. So companies lose out because people go off sick because they feel bullied. They don't feel safe. So they go off sick. People can lose weight, gain weight. They could take up substances. Their mental health suffers. And if you try and put up more boundaries to protect your mental health, sometimes the bully will try and get at you about your boundaries. And all you're doing is trying to keep yourself safe, protect yourself. So, for instance, you might have to go into counseling because you're being bullied. You might have to leave at 5 o'clock on the dot to get to your counseling session. But the bully will pretend that they work all hours of the day and night and to make you look as though you're not as dedicated as they are. That's how juvenile, delinquent the bully is. That's how emotionally dysregulated the bully is. That is how emotionally unintelligent the bully is. If you are being bullied in the workplace, stay tuned for my interview with Claire Hunt. She is amazing. This is part 1. I have to present it in 2 parts because it's long and it's so much. It's rich in information. You will resonate with the information. You will come away with things to do, a plan as well. You will come away with so much information. This is the finale of season 3. I cannot believe we're ending season 3. We usually take, either the end of August or the whole month of September off, which is what we're doing. So we'll be back. This is part 1 of the season finale. Stay tuned for part 2, which is next week. But here's the interview with Claire Hunt on workplace bullying and narcissistic abuse. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on your post notifications so you never miss an episode, and leave me a comment. Comments are so important. The channel has just been, monetized. I couldn't get it. And follow us on TikTok. We need to get better at posting on TikTok. But also, we're going to be doing a few live sessions coming up as well. I'm going to do some live readings because, I'm a spiritual medium, so I'm going to do live readings on the channel soon. So if you want to get a live reading, all free, if you want to get a live reading, make sure you send us a message on Instagram or send us an email, something, so we can get your name down. And I will give you an in-depth reading live on the channel. I'm really excited to do that, and I'm doing it to give back to all the subscribers who've taken us to 1,800, I think. It's hard getting subscribers on YouTube these days. People do watch, but most of them are not subscribed. So thank you to those who've subscribed. Thanks to all the new subscribers. And we'll see you back next week for part 2. Here's the interview with Claire Hunt. Claire, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so honored.
Now, in my intro, I would have talked a lot about your experience, and it is quite a niche area. It's very specific. And if you look at businesses and workplaces, you often see sort of HR, and you see these business coaches and all of this. But I find a lot of them are not experts in the psychology of what we would call bullying, specifically workplace bullying. And listening to your YouTube channel, it is surprising how many people, reading through the comments, experience this. And a lot of people feel that bullying happens when in childhood, and that's it, and people grow up. Well, they do grow up, but they grow up into adult bullies. So I want, if you can, explain to our listeners, our viewers, what do we mean by workplace bullying?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think it's so misunderstood. And unfortunately, it's really something that you can't understand unless you've experienced it yourself. I'm surprised too. When I started my videos on workplace bullying, I didn't have any expectations. And I've been quite shocked to hear what people are experiencing all over the world. I thought I had it bad, but I've heard horror stories that make mine pale in comparison. The people who are bullies in the workplace were bullied. And I call it revenge of the nerds. And this is their revenge. The difference between childhood bullying and workplace bullying is that in childhood, the one who gets bullied is usually the one who's different, the one who's heavy or has red hair or a person of color or is LGBTQ or just some kind of difference that's attracting the bullying. In the workplace, most of the time, the one who gets bullied is the star usually the highest performing, simultaneously very well liked. And so the target of workplace bullying kind of looks like the popular kids in high school, and the bullies in the workplace are getting their revenge because they never healed their high school trauma.
Interesting.
Workplace bullying ranges. I've identified about 20 different workplace bullying techniques, what I call techniques, which are specific behaviors, ranging from very petty, infantile, juvenile bullying that resembles the schoolyard playground, like ridicule, staring, and nose holding, all the way up to really big ticket behaviors that are full-on assaults on your actual work, like sabotage and withholding. Almost all of these behaviors are as passive aggressive as they possibly can be, because workplace bullies are smart. They know exactly what they're doing, and they know how to behave in ways that can be interpreted subjectively, so they can never be called on their behavior. And that's why I say when it comes to workplace bullying, everything is intent. Most targets of workplace bullying are intuitive, and they tend to respond more to the underlying intent behind the behavior than to the actual actions or words. If you are intuitive, you know when someone is malicious, sadistic, and cruel, and when they want to hurt you.
And you touched on some important things there. So one thing I'm so glad you did say was the fact that they know what they're doing. The number of times, because I used to do mediation as well, and I was a staff counselor in a hospital at one point. So the number of times I would hear the bully say, well, I wasn't aware of any of that. This is surprising to me to hear this. Oh, I'm shocked that this person feels that way. You know, when you're intuitive, you can see right through it. You know they're aware. They're fully aware. So is it gaslighting when someone then says, oh, perhaps they don't know what they're doing. Perhaps they forgot. Perhaps they weren't aware of what they're doing. How? Because I want to talk about, you do talk about gaslighting in some of your videos. But what is it when people say, I wasn't aware of that?
If it's coming from the bully, he's just lying. They're all pathological liars. Some of them are better liars than others. Some of them, I mean, it's a full-on Academy Award-winning performance. I mean, brava, you know, you get the Oscar. I mean, they're very skilled liars. Some of them, it's, you know, they're terrible liars. I mean, but if you're intuitive, you always know when someone's lying to you, regardless of the quality of the performance. There are some people in the workplace who are not intuitive. People who have not experienced significant trauma in their lives tend to not develop their intuition because they don't have to. And they tend not to read very deeply into things and accept most of life on a kind of surface, superficial level. These are the people who are very likely to fall for the narcissistic mask, the false self, not really see through them for who they really are. These are the people who kind of go along to get along. One would call them codependent or enablers. Some of them, I mean, when they say that they were not aware or they didn't know, they might be telling the truth. But I think that's because they weren't paying attention.
Yeah. And also, could it be, and I'm just thinking about the things I've heard, could it be that they are unconscious of their behavior? Could it be that they've gotten away with it for so long that perhaps they're not conscious of it and nobody's pulled them up? Because one thing about bullies is They literally, they're a walking definition. We have a saying here in the UK, they do what it says on the tin. You know, you read the instruction. That's what the workplace bully, it does what it means. It does what it is, a bully. It frightens people. People become afraid of them.
They want people to be afraid of them. The verb for bully, the verb in other language is intimidar or intimidate. Some people are afraid of them. To be honest with you, most people feel sorry for them. The enablers, the doormats, the codependents, most people can see that these people are sick. They have trauma, hurt people. They tend to manipulate people with what I call the narcissistic sob story, kind of oversharing their personal struggles in the workplace in ways that are not necessarily appropriate or professional. And it's because they're trying to elicit sympathy, kind of like a don't mess with me defense to get a pass for their bad behavior. And you had just said something prior to saying that people are afraid of them. Are they unconscious? Yes. I mean, I would argue that, anyone who has arrived at a place in life where they need to hurt other people in order to feel good about themselves is by definition operating on a completely unconscious level, a very, very low vibrational, low spiritual level. I would say they haven't really done any work and have failed to evolve in any capacity. Now, some of their behaviors may be unconscious. They may not realize how they are hurting or harassing other people, but the majority of their behaviors are intentional. The intent is to hurt and to make other people feel bad so that they can feel good.
Yes. And when I was looking at the psychology of bullying years ago, actually, The Guardian, I mean, here in the UK, The Guardian, newspapers are a big deal. So people align themselves with political aspects or aspirations and a newspaper in the UK. So The Guardian has its whole own, people out there will know what I'm talking about, but I'm talking about The Guardian because it is a respected newspaper, UK people. And people do look to it, but they did a short piece on bullying. And it made me think about the fact that I wonder if some of their actions are projections.
Yes, of course. I mean, the bully, of course, never sees the target clearly and has to paint a picture of the target whereby the target deserves the abuse. One thing that targets of workplace bullying really need to understand is that in the mind of the bully, you have it coming. They really, really believe that you hurt them first. You provoked them, and this is just their retaliation or their revenge. On a very superficial surface level, workplace bullying is pathological jealousy. You have something that they don't have. On a deeper level, it's a very thorny psychological dynamic that's going on where there certainly is a lot of projection. You may remind the bully of someone from their past who hurt them, usually a primary caretaker, but it could be anyone, a spouse, ex, sibling. You have certain qualities about you that you've been able to retain that the bully has completely abandoned and discarded. Okay, so that's going to be very triggering because you're showing up with the energy that they have rejected, and they can't have that. And you're right. Studies show that bullying is an anxiety condition. Bullies, I would say, by definition, almost all of them have an anxious attachment style and a lot of anxiety. And this is their way of venting this anxiety that they feel. And, the biggest bullying behavior, the most common one, is simply the gossip. that eats up hours out of everyone's day. And we know that gossip is something that people do to vent anxiety.
Never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button right now. Thank you for your support. You make this podcast possible. Now, back to the show.
Absolutely. It's quite characteristic of a narcissist as well. Weaving those little threads of doubt for people and, that kind of thing. I want to talk about a few things in this interview as well, because I know people will be interested. Social justice. Also, why it's important to seek not to harm others on many levels. The psychological impact workplace bullying will have on the person being bullied, and if it has some type of impact on the person who is bullying, and also why you may think company and industry-wise bullying could be on the rise. There's lots of studies at the moment, people talking about bullying, but it could be connected to anxiety. I'm not too sure. So we'll touch upon all those things as we go. And viewers, listeners, bear with me. I'm just so excited to have Claire on the show that I've got so much I want to ask her about to get her expertise, that I'm trying to pace myself. So bear with me if I jump around a bit. I'm sure Claire will keep me on track anyway. So one of the first things I want to talk about is this pandemic. We've seen many pandemics, but you have said that workplace bullying is a pandemic, and it's seeping through the crevices of all these, my words, but seeping through the crevices of many workplaces. And you mentioned something about siblings. Before I let it go, I do want to say the issue of siblings is so overlooked in so many areas. Siblings are usually the bane of your existence, whether you had them or whether you didn't. And in my counseling rooms, being an only child carries its own issues as well. So sibling rivalry, for one, we talked about jealousy as well, and sibling rivalry is real. It's a real thing. And if you don't resolve it, it will walk right in with you to that first job, to that promotion, and everything else. So we've seen that, and I see people overlook the whole sibling issue. They always want to look at the parents, is it mom, is it dad? But if you've got sibling, and if wherever you're placed in the family, first child, second child, last child, there's angst all around that. But anyway, you see, this is where I get off track. But it's all related. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal history of workplace bullying?
Sure. So in the States, you are legally allowed to begin professional work at 16. So I did, just because I could. I had babysat before that, but I got my first real job as a server in a restaurant when I was 16. And my coworker traced her fingernails up and down the back of my shirt to see whether or not I was wearing a bra. That would actually be a sexual assault. Fast forward 31 years later, I was working for a nonprofit for domestic and sexual violence, and the president and CEO of the agency organized an agency-wide social event off-site, to which she invited every single one of the agency's 61 employees, except for me. And I sat alone at my desk for 4 hours in an empty building that morning. And then she gave raises to every single member of the management team, except for me. In the interim, I had many positions. I worked in many different industries and was bullied throughout all of it. So that's how I I feel like I'm somewhat of an expert on workplace bullying at this point. At the suggestion of a friend who is a millennial, I decided to start a YouTube channel, and I started making videos in 2018, but my philosophy was half-baked. I didn't really know fully what I was talking about. So I deleted those videos and I continued to educate myself about narcissism. And then in 2019, I uploaded my pedagogical videos because I was a tutor and teacher for many years, and I just wanted to preserve my pedagogy because I'm proud of it. And
can you explain what that is, please, Claire?
Sure. So I worked as a tutor and teacher for about 15 years, and I tutored primarily English for internationals, which you would call ESL maybe. In the UK, I don't know what you call it. And I also tutored standardized exams because in the States, for admission into undergraduate or graduate study, you generally have to pass some kind of standardized exam. And I was proud of my teaching philosophy, sort of the way that I instructed my students. And so I just wanted to kind of preserve that in video format to reflect what the content and the material that I had already created for my professional website. And then at the beginning of 2020, I got an intuitive download that I needed to start making videos about workplace bullying again. I don't know why. I was just told that this is very important. So I began making videos about workplace bullying again, and the response has been overwhelming. I have viewers all over the world. So of course, from every English-speaking country, from Canada to Australia, and quite a lot all over Europe, including in non-English-speaking countries. Americans with an inferiority complex vis-a-vis Europe tend to think that everything in Europe is better. If anything, I've come to the conclusion that the bullying in Europe may actually be worse because it's so difficult to fire someone there. And so they literally have to drive you crazy to force you to quit or to get you to do something that mandates your dismissal. And I do want to say about the sibling issue, I do have a video titled Workplace Bullying is Sibling Rivalry. Or actually, the title is Workplace Bullying is Punching Across. Another myth about workplace bullying is that it's punching down. So the stereotypical image that the term workplace bullying conjures up for people who don't really understand the issue is usually a narcissistic boss, usually an older white male who calls his quivering codependent subordinate on the carpet in front of him and then proceeds to verbally berate her. Does that happen? Yes, sure. Doctors bully their nurses. This is true. But in my experience, the worst bullying is among the subordinates. It's among the underlings, the lateral colleagues who are squabbling like children because they don't have any supervisory capacity or they're not ranked very highly in the hierarchy. And so they feel that they don't have any power. And so they derive power by bullying their lateral colleagues because, bullying, it's a power trip. It's all about power for people who are disempowered because they have absolutely no clue how to source power from within. And that's why we call it being empowered, because all real power, of course, like everything in life, is derived exclusively internally. But they never figured that out. Bullies are very much people who are externally focused and running around the workplace all day, every day, trying to source everything that they want and need from other people in a maladaptive and dysfunctional way. Sibling rivalry is part of what I call the tug of war or the seesaw that most people on the planet are participating in, which is a binary opposition. It's black and white thinking. It's either or. If you have that means that I don't have. If you're up, that means that I'm down. If you get attention, that means I don't get any attention. It's a very primitive, wrong-headed way of thinking, and it's competitive, but it's competitive for things that are abstract. I understand competing for finite resources like oil, money, water, and land. Sure, but everyone in the workplace is competing over abstract concepts like attention, popularity, validation, approval, and recognition. And this is poverty or scarcity consciousness. There's not enough of the good stuff to go around, because people just cannot evolve in their thinking that your rights do nothing to threaten my power. And an improved quality of life for everyone makes life better for everyone. Like I rise, we all rise. Most people are still sitting on the seesaw, participating in this tug of war, feeling threatened that another person's success is somehow encroaching upon their power.
Incredible. As you speak about this, it sounds like such a simple concept. I rise, we all rise.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it so difficult to, there's so much going through my head. The spiritual aspect of what you're talking about, which I want to touch upon. But also that must be in childhood. And I know people hate it when therapists and people say, "Oh, do I have to talk about my child?" But I'm afraid your childhood was pretty much the blueprint. And so that kind of scarcity thinking, as you mentioned, must have come from that. And somebody out there will be saying, "Oh, but I was an only child." Well, again, that carries its own set of issues. But the bully must be, if you're talking about, wanting a place, needing to play, they perhaps need to be first, or is it that they need to be first in line, or they need to be considered first, or they need to be seen as first when they haven't got the capacity to be that or do that? Because from everything you're saying, it sounds like the workplace bully really doesn't have a lot of capacity for a lot, because they're consumed by their angst, I'm using that term for lack of a better one at the moment, their anxiety, their everything. It seems all consuming. It seems like it takes up so much time.
Yes, Andrei Tarkovsky said, evil is all that is unnecessary. The waste in the contemporary workplace would blow your mind. No wonder the planet is dying. I mean, the paper waste is just the tip of the iceberg. But workplace bullies are people who spend more time bullying than they do actually working. The gossip, again, is just the tip of the iceberg. I'm talking about 4 hours a day of gossip on company time and company pay, because they're so emotionally dysregulated. They just don't know how to get it together and are dragging all of that drama and all of that trauma into the workplace where they're trying to work it out. It's kind of like a playground or a forum for exercising their psychological demons, which, yes, come from childhood, which is not appropriate. Most people do their emotional work in their families and their partnerships. That's why 99% of all the content about narcissism out there is just all about romantic relationships. That's where we see all the drama and the fireworks. And family is the emotional space. And then if you still feel you're not getting your needs met in your family, you can march your little checkbook down the street and you can go find a therapist. But you don't need to be bringing it into the workplace. Unfortunately, everyone does. including targets of workplace bullying. Most, if not all, targets of workplace bullying have significant childhood trauma themselves, which I addressed in my video. Workplace bullying is a recreation of your dysfunctional childhood family of origin. I am not a psychologist, so unfortunately, I don't have enough knowledge to know why we as adults keep repeating these patterns and encountering the same situations over and over again. As victims of childhood abuse or trauma, we chose not to take that out on other people, which is what bullies are doing. What is the difference? I don't know. One of us took the red pill and the other one took the blue pill. I don't know what makes someone make the choice to abuse. I think that in some situations, we, as targets of workplace bullying, we are kind of like recreating our childhood trauma because we're trying to get it right. Could you please do it right this time? It's maybe the psychological concept of undoing. It's like a do-over. Unfortunately, it doesn't work.
Yes, I agree. And it just reminds me of something Freud said, that we all have the compulsion to repeat. And if that's the compulsion, if that is true, then we will seek out unconsciously a situation whereby it's repeated and repeated and repeated. I used to think that it's to solve it, it's to get over it. On a spiritual level, I believe that it's connected to something like that. Or perhaps the soul, I don't know, is seeking some kind of resolution, of course. Or sometimes, and spiritual people have a knack for not giving themselves credit spiritually, but I think sometimes we're there to help other people as well. Sometimes perhaps the bullied is bullied because they are teaching as well. I've seen it happen. And on a spiritual level, sometimes the mob associated with the bully. And I know you recently did something on mobbing, which is all workplace bullying, as you say. I completely agree. But I've seen that mob learn from the person who puts up their boundaries, who does not accept the bullying, and the mob watches the person being bullied. But the more the person stands up for themselves, I've seen the people associated with the bully kind of learn that, oh, okay, this person's not going to take it, I'll back off. And then the bully is left standing on their own to do it all. And what I usually see is a bright light. This halo starts to, not the good halo, but the spotlight saying, this is the one that's causing most of the trouble here. This is the one. So I'm wondering again, and this is just things I've seen, what are the theories about workplace bullying? I mean, we've touched upon some of them, but why does someone who's gone through a whole lot of trauma, and maybe we will never be it, maybe this is the proverbial, £1,000,000 question, but why would someone who's experienced trauma and then another person who's experienced exactly the same trauma, if it can be measured, one doesn't become a bully, the other one does become a bully? I wonder why that happens.
That is a $1,000,000 question. I don't know. Because wherever we have the capacity, wherever we get wounded in life, we have the capacity to wound others. That's your Chiron in astrology. Like I said, one of us takes the red pill and the other one takes the blue pill. It may be some kind of people who do not turn into abusers may be more emotionally expansive and more emotionally literate, so that they have more tools and more wherewithal to process emotion more effectively. than bullies who are lacking in self-awareness and are not aware of what they are feeling and therefore can't process what they feel.
Yes. And a lot of times what I've experienced is that if you appear to be quite a nice person, decent person, you're not harming anyone, you're just going about your day, people sometimes see that as a weakness. Oh, they're nice. They're smiling. They're smiling. Something must be wrong. I'm going to wipe that smile right off their face, kind of thing. But is it true, do you think, that people sometimes can appear to be weak if they tend to walk through life not seeking to harm other people? And because that's the basics. But is that not okay for the bully?
Well, they, some of them have pretty impressive false self that they're putting out to the world, where they do present as not only okay, but also amazing. And by abusing the target and making the target unhappy, they make the target look like the Debbie Downer, and they make the target look like the problem. But yes, part of the definition, the dictionary definition of bullying, is that a bully will target someone that he or she perceives as weak. I would change the word weak maybe to vulnerable. All abusers are weak and lazy cowards. They like a nice, soft, easy target. Okay, so they pick off the wounded animal at the edge of the herd. They're not going to go for someone who, has done their work and has shored up their boundaries and is standing on a very solid foundation. They look for vulnerabilities that they can take advantage of and exploit. So these vulnerabilities could just be the rank in the hierarchy. It could just be that you're new, so you don't have seniority, you don't have any supervisory capacity, you don't have as long a tenure, or you're at a lower pay grade. Other vulnerabilities could include pre-existing trauma, which they can smell like sharks smell blood in the water, no matter how hard you try to hide it. You could have pre-existing low self-esteem, and some of us have our own mental health issues as well. Yes, anything that is traditionally feminine is, or I would say heteronormatively feminine, is going to be perceived as weakness. Okay, so that's not just the niceness, emotionality. We are living in the emotional dark ages, and the word emotional is considered a bad word. It's like an insult. So emotionality and sensitivity and intuition, these qualities will always be perceived as weakness, because they are heteronormatively feminine, and we are living in a patriarchy, and they need to be derogated. Everything that's traditionally feminine needs to be derogated. Workplace bullies themselves are very emotional people. They're emotionally dysregulated. They're full of anxiety. They're full of rage, and they don't like that. So they're looking to offload. They are projecting, as you said, and so often they're going to target someone who is, like I said, more emotionally expansive. You kind of look like the workplace trash can, because you can process their emotions for them. One of my viewers called it the office chew toy. I like that one.
That's pretty good. You said earlier, I'm not a psychologist, but I always believe in something I like to say, an expert by experience. So I think you are an expert in this area. And I've seen a lot of, narcissism has blown up like you wouldn't believe. It's because we have access to the information. But on the internet, everybody's looking it up, but I've seen some people discuss it without having worked with them in a clinical way, but they don't have to be a clinical expert. They may have experience with it. So that can make you in my eyes, an expert, because we know some clinicians, you know, you can get all your degrees, you can get your doctorates and everything else. But if you haven't worked alongside someone or been in a room with someone or, you know, been in a relationship with someone, whatever it may be, then what you have is knowledge, book knowledge, which anybody can take in, really. So we know that. I've certainly worked with clinicians who you have to say, wait, hang on, you know, that's not the case. And luckily they've been open to different areas. Sometimes I think you need the intuitives like myself. You need people from a holistic viewpoint. You need people, other people besides clinicians, to come in with a view to help people, because it's mind, body, soul. Those are my thoughts.
Yes, I feel like I have an honorary PhD in psychology at this point, and it's because of personal experience. I haven't had a psychology class in over 30 years. I took psychology in high school, and that class was taught by the volleyball coach. It's kind of like learning a foreign language. When you study a foreign language as an adult, if you achieve fluency, in the end, you actually know that language better than the native speakers, because you know it on a cognitive and intellectual level, and they kind of know most of it on an intuitive level that they acquired when they were very small children. If anything, I would say what I've learned in the past 30 plus years, I was forced to learn because of my own lack of empathy. Because I myself grew up in a dysfunctional family with abuse. I believe I identify as non-neurotypical. I believe I am autistic. So when I went out into the world as an adult, well, like every abused child, I thought, oh, well, I'm 18, so I'm leaving my parents' house, and now everything's just going to be great. And then 30 years later, you know, this is not what I had in mind. Other people's behavior was so shocking. I mean, it was like they were speaking a foreign language. I just couldn't get my head around it. I think that if you're one of those very rare people who came from a home with emotional literacy, where you were taught emotional intelligence, and you encountered toxic people, you might not be as surprised. You might simply understand, oh yeah, that's just how they are. But for those of us, maybe with less empathy or less emotional intelligence, you kind of have to learn everything the hard way. And so I unfortunately had to spend a lot of time kind of serving as my bully's armchair psychologist to try to work out why they are the way they are, if only to make myself feel better. That in and of itself can be another way to self-avoid, self-abandon, and it's also kind of passive bullying, because as long as you are focused on other people's toxicity and dysfunction, then you get a get out of jail free pass out of ever looking at your own, which is victim consciousness. And that's why I no longer consume any narcissism content, because I feel that the narcissistic abuse community is unfortunately full of so many people who are so heavily victimized, and they themselves are on that seesaw and participating in the tug of war, where it's just all about these great big meanies and how horrible they are, and how I am this perfect little angel and this precious little snowflake who is just as pure as the driven snow by comparison. And so at a certain level, we may actually be attracting subconsciously, like you said, attracting toxic people into our lives, because it's taking the spotlight off of our own dysfunction, if that makes sense.
It does indeed. Yes, I certainly stopped watching the narcissist. Well, I only had watched 2 videos, and something did happen, which I'll probably tell you about later. But I will say this bit. One of these psychiatrists who claims to be a world expert, one of my viewers left a comment on that psychiatrist's page. Now, I didn't know anything about it, but James, who does all my stuff, he arranges interviews and everything. James actually said, "Oh, we got this email from this person, and I've looked them up. They comment on the videos, they follow you." And they left a nice comment on the psychiatrist's website saying, you know, you should check out this website. So, which was nice, which was really nice. They said, come to the Inquisitive Wren. Well, a few weeks later, every topic, I've just done a video on narcissism. Every topic that I mentioned, they had picked it apart and did a video. In other words, they copied, because I'm a lesser content creator, aren't I? So nobody's going to see. So and they're now talking about the Wren. Now, how many people know the story of the Wren? I don't think it's widely known story, but now they're using the Wren, a part of my talking about the history of it all, which I talked about in my video. So I would say a lot of narcissism is it's very niche, it's very odd. People talk about narcissism, but unless you've actually been in a relationship with somebody like that, or work clinically with somebody who's diagnosed with narcissism, it's very difficult to know the intricacies of it. And what I see in this person, which I didn't even know about this psychiatrist until that happened. I had no idea that this person existed, is that they too have some traits of narcissism, and that's probably why they chose to marry a narcissist. And their whole premise, which I had no idea, is based upon talking about or putting people down, which is what the narcissist does. The narcissist creates hate campaigns about people. So people on websites, part of it is to educate. But I do find that in that case, and I feel like I'm talking too much now, but I do find in that sense, this is what this person did. I'm just shocked that they would take some of my content when they have millions of subscribers.
That's the problem with being a content creator. When you upload for free, there are opportunists who will copy, and there is competition in this community because, like you said, a lot of content creators who are talking about narcissism are actually narcissistic themselves. And I was one of them. I mean, I was raised by a narcissist, so I caught narc fleas and had to do a lot of work to undo a lot of my own narcissistic tendencies. Well, narcissism is on a continuum, just like autism. It's on a spectrum. So some of them, no, I mean, they're too far gone. They'll never evolve in this lifetime. But I do think that some can make some progress. And, you know, encountering narcissists, whether it's in our families or our romantic relationships or in our workplaces, it is a wonderful opportunity to use that experience as a mirror to take a look at ourselves. Well, how have I had delusions of grandeur? How have I not had the best empathy sometimes? How have I had bad boundaries? How have I violated other people's boundaries or not asserted my own? How have I been emotionally dysregulated? How have I lied? Everyone lies. How have I been dismissive or superficial or insecure? You know, where in my life have I been insecure? And then I can take that information, turn around and focus on my own personal growth and self-development, because there's nothing else that you can do. You do not have control over other adults. In fact, you don't really have control over anyone. I hope you don't control your kids. You don't really control your pets. You're just a guardian. You're not an owner. So that's why on my channel, I try to stress the importance of focusing on yourself and your own self-care, looking at your role in the dynamic, personal growth, self-development, as well as spirituality. And I hate to keep harping on the spiritual aspect, but sometimes that's all we have. I remember Bill Maher, an American comedian, did a documentary about religion, and he had interviewed inmates in prison. And he is, I believe he's atheist or agnostic. He's not a fan of organized religion. And the prisoners said to him, look, Jesus is all I got in here. Some workplaces are so bad, and these people have our hands tied, that it really forces you into your spirituality because you have nothing else. The ideal would be laws protecting targets of workplace bullying, as well as a leadership change. But legislative change, in my country at least, generational and incrementally slow. And it's one step forward, two steps back. Anytime we make any progress in victims' rights, there is a backlash. We had reproductive rights for about 50 years, and now we don't anymore. Same-sex marriage could be overturned any day now. So in the meantime, while we're waiting for these changes to protect us, we have to pay rent. If you get burned in a narcissistic romantic relationship, you can just say, well, the hell with that, I'm just going to be single. And which a lot of people do. It's not ideal, but you can live alone, you can be single, and you can live without love. Most people can't go without a paycheck. So it's more like, what can you do in your own personal space to self-regulate and to deepen your spirituality so that you're not in so much pain while you're dealing with all of this chaos and this drama. And narcissism remains pretty poorly understood, including by the mental health community. And again, I don't think anyone understands anything about workplace bullying. So it's difficult to find a provider who can really support you the way that you need. And finding the right therapist for you is a matter of trial and error. And most people don't have that kind of money, especially people who are being bullied in the workplace. I was lucky to find a very supportive therapist who really understood me, that I worked with for 20 years. But I find therapy, to be honest with you, only marginally helpful. Therapy is awareness. Therapy is deconstructive, which is like, well, okay, this is why I am the way that I am. This is why other people are the way that they are. This is why these patterns keep recurring in my life. But at some point, you're going to have to start reconstructing, okay? Because the toxicity and, the dysfunctional, evil people of the world get in your way, and they like to knock you down, and they like to knock you off your path of purpose. And like I said, it created lost 30 years of my life. Because other people couldn't let me express myself and come into my own. So at some point, you're going to have to take the focus off of the negative people in your life and, going down the rabbit hole and psychoanalyzing them to death and becoming their armchair psychologist. Because at the end of the day, all of that ruminating and that negative obsessing is going to do you about as much good as licking the inside of a toilet bowl. It's your life and it's your path, and you are here to create because you are fashioned in the image of the Creator, and the Holy Spirit is creativity. So you're going to have to start, at some point, you're going to have to start rebuilding. Also, therapy is derived from psychology, which is a soft science, which demands acceptance from mainstream academia. And because of that, it dismisses outright anything that can't be quantified by the five senses, which includes our intuition. And so unless you are fortunate to find a parapsychologist, most therapists will dismiss outright any spiritual aspects like meditation. And I think that if you eliminate or overlook the spiritual component, you're missing a huge piece of the puzzle. I love my therapist. She's my best friend, but I discontinued therapy about a year and a half ago. And I poured myself into my spiritual practices instead. And I'll tell you what, in the last year and a half, I've made more progress than I made in 20 years of therapy. Because I pulled back my energy. I stopped thinking about the bullies. I stopped focusing on the bullies and the negativity and the drama and all this stuff outside of myself. I pulled back my energy. I poured it back into myself. I poured cement into my own foundation. And I connected to source, God is universe, higher self, whatever you want to call it. And I downloaded the energy that I needed to rebuild myself back up internally. And I feel lighter, happier, healthier, and better equipped to navigate a toxic world than I ever have in my life.
That's amazing, Claire. And you know, whenever somebody starts therapy, I always tell them my main job is to make myself redundant.
Yeah.
Like you did, you poured yourself into your spirituality. For some people, it will be that they take up jogging every day, or they take up walking, or they now go to the gym 3 times a week. You're going to get in there, mind, body, soul. You're going to have to do the stuff yourself. And of course, therapists become therapists because people say, oh, all therapists are messed up. I think that's being very harsh on yourself if you think you're a therapist and you're messed up. I think you become therapist because you've got the experience. You've had some things happen in your life where you've learned and you can help people. It's as simple as that. You know, I don't have a mathematics brain. I wasn't going to ever be a doctor. So, you know, but I knew from a child that I could be helpful in some way. Not always, but I could be. What I love is I interviewed early on in this podcast one of my best friends I've known for over 30 years, Kelly. She's an actress, and we were very close in LA. And she came on and she said, Sha, you're a therapist. Isn't that amazing? And I was like, exactly, because we used to be out in the clubs, dancing, doing. So you go through your evolution in life. Therapy is a job. That's it. Like do we say to nurses, "Ooh, I bet you had a tough life," or "I bet you must be pretty messed up to be a nurse"? Do we say to other people, "Oh, you're flipping burger, you know that was such a good burger. You started a restaurant. I bet you had a tough childhood." We don't say that about any other profession, you know. So I think I love what you said. You got what you needed from that therapy. But I think it's important what you were talking about. And I know it's going to help someone out there who's looking to someone. It may not be a therapist. It could be your best friend you're looking to always listen and always do this or that or be there. But you're an impartial person who only has your best interest at heart. That's what I am as somebody's therapist when I did it a lot. And what you said is paramount. Eventually, you've got to do the work yourself. In whatever way that is, you've got to do it. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay tuned for part 2, which is very exciting. Claire gives you tips and tricks to use if you're being bullied in the workplace. You don't have to take it. There's legislation to help you, and there are ways, even if you don't want to go down that route, there are ways in which you can get through it. The important thing is you cannot expect your managers, your bosses, or other people to understand exactly what's happening. Remember, workplace bullies bully you in private, mostly. Now, some of them will want to do it in public, and some of them, and most of them, will do it, especially if they have narcissistic abuse tendencies. If they are narcissistic, they will bully you in private so that you cannot have evidence in front of everyone else. They'll bully you in private, so it makes you look as though you're the one that's the problem. Claire cuts through all of that, and it's so insightful. You don't want to miss it. Incredible information, incredible stuff. She's the expert on this. She knows what she's talking about. Please stay tuned. Tune in to part 2 soon.